Hey guys, tonight we step back into a world that smells like soot, wet wool, and a hint of mischief, and we wander straight into the labyrinthine alleys of a Victorian slum. You probably won't survive this without at least one minor panic attack, but that's half the fun. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's fun to see who's joining us from somewhere cozy versus somewhere equally chaotic. Now let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a narrow street so tight that the walls of the tenement houses practically scrape your shoulders. Smoke curls from chimneys that never seem to rest, and the smell of wet stone mingles with something you hope is bread baking but suspect is closer to yesterday's refuse. Children dart barefoot between puddles and horse manure like it's a competitive sport, and a woman leans from a window to yell at them, though her own laundry drapes the street like colourful banners. Historians still argue whether these alleys were deliberately narrow to save on property taxes or simply grew organically out of desperation, but right now, you're just trying not to trip over the slick cobblestones. A street vendor hawks stew from a battered pot, the smell sour but oddly tempting. You notice rats as large as cats weaving under carts and barrels. Oddly, some Londoners claim their fur was softer than store-bought brushes, and a fringe theory even suggested kids sometimes used them as makeshift pets, which feels equal parts terrifying and hilarious. Meanwhile, the incessant chatter, clatter, and occasional coughing assault your ears. Every sound is amplified by the close quarters, and you realise sleep here might be optional if you're sensitive to chaos. You inhale sharply, imagining your own bed back home, and can't help but chuckle nervously at the absurdity. You'd last about an hour before begging for fresh air. By the time you reach the corner where two alleys intersect, you feel like the city itself is watching, judging your every hesitant step. Laundry swings overhead, the flicker of gas lamps casts dancing shadows, and a horse-drawn cart nearly knocks you over. You dodge expertly, or at least you try, because one misstep here doesn't just earn a reprimand, it could land you in a pile of muck or on a neighbour's toes. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen you read about last week? Well, consider that mild compared to the aromatic cocktail of decay surrounding you now. And as you duck under another laundry line, you wonder, not for the last time, whether you'd actually survive a single day in this slum. The doorway you duck through opens into a dim, narrow room that smells of sweat, boiled cabbage, and the faintly sweet tang of unwashed children. You immediately notice that space is a relative term here. 10 people cram themselves into what you generously call a living area, and any notion of personal boundaries evaporates like steam from the cooking pot. The floorboards creak under every shuffle, and you instinctively step lightly, aware that a misstep could topple someone off their chair or bed. Historians still argue whether these rooms were originally designed for families, or if landlords merely saw human bodies as furniture. But for you, the distinction is academic. Survival is the only concern. You take in the sleeping arrangements, mattresses on the floor, thin blankets, and a curious mix of smells that assault your senses. A child sneezes, and the sound ricochets off the walls like an unwelcome percussion, prompting a chorus of coughs in reply. Light from a single gas lamp flickers, casting elongated shadows over peeling wallpaper and stacks of crates repurposed as tables. One quirky fringe note. Some families claim that hanging onions around the room warded off illness. A charming idea until you realise the pungent aroma doubles as an olfactory assault. You wrinkle your nose but can't help but admire the ingenuity. Between the beds, you notice a tiny precarious stove, and the occupants manoeuvre around it like seasoned dancers, careful not to topple it or themselves. You sit on the edge of a mattress and feel the heat radiating from bodies and metal alike, realising that even in winter there's no real cool spot. Historians still argue whether crowding contributed more to disease spread than poor sanitation, and honestly, you're too busy dodging elbows and toddlers to care. Privacy, you quickly learn, is a luxury not afforded in these walls. A neighbour's argument carries through the thin plaster. You can hear laughter, weeping, and the occasional braying of a horse from the alley. You sit rigidly, trying to remember your own routines, morning coffee, shower, a few minutes scrolling through your phone, and it all feels impossibly distant. The sheer density of life, constant motion, and sensory overload make you understand why anyone attempting even a single night here might start questioning their life choices. By the time the lamp gutter flickers low, you're exhausted just from navigating proximity, smells and noise. You glance at a child balancing on a crate like it's a high-wire act and chuckle nervously at the scene, thinking, "Yep, I'd never survive this circus." You find yourself at a rickety stall where a man pours watery gin into chipped mugs, the smell sharp enough to make your eyes water. You hesitate, glancing at the loaf of bread beside him that's more brick than food, and take a cautious bite. Historians still argue whether the poor drank alcohol out of necessity, boredom, or sheer defiance, but right now, it's hard to tell the difference. You sip the gin, grimacing, and wonder if it's technically safer than the puddle of water they're calling tea. Some eccentric reports suggest kids sometimes spike the brew with sugar, or even a dash of ginger to make it civilized, which, if true, is both charming and terrifying. The bread crumbles between your fingers, stale enough to double as kindling, but hunger is insistent. You watch as a woman carefully inspects a pot of stew, tossing in random herbs and perhaps a pinch of chalk. Historians still argue whether chalk actually made the food last longer, or was purely a money-saving myth. Your stomach twists, but curiosity wins. You dip a spoon in and note that it tastes like a compromise between survival and regret. Meanwhile, the murky river water sloshes nearby, carrying a faint tang of something you hope isn't cholera. Fringe accounts claim that some residents added crushed alum or even urine to clarify it, which, you decide, is not a cocktail you want to try. Moving on, you notice kids scavenging for scraps with an energy that both impresses and terrifies you. Rats are bold, darting openly, some even sharing discarded morsels with the smallest humans. Historians still debate whether urban rats were an unavoidable nuisance or a quasi-pet phenomenon for children, and you can't help but shudder as a particularly audacious one nibbles near your boot. Meanwhile, the stench of spoiled milk hits you as you pass another stall. Some claim that sour milk cured minor ailments, others say it was a vector for misery. You dodge a splash and think ruefully that your modern grocery store definitely deserves a medal. As the afternoon drags on, you realise that every sip and bite carries risk. The danger is invisible, like the ghosts of cholera past. Your stomach growls in protest, your taste buds stage a small rebellion, and you wonder how anyone survives a week, let alone a lifetime, in this nutrient roulette. Yet, amidst the misery, you catch glimpses of ingenuity. Kids fashioning toys from scraps, neighbours bartering, and someone cleverly using a broken umbrella as a sunshade. You shake your head, imagining yourself trying even one day here, and quietly concede that you'd starve, sip poison, or collapse before sunset. By late afternoon, you find yourself pushing through the fog of smoke and dust toward a factory where the sound of clanging machinery greets you like a punch in the chest. You quickly notice that the work is relentless. Levers jerk, wheels spin, and steam hisses from pipes as if the building itself is alive and resentful. Your back aches just watching, and your lungs flare at the dust and fibres hanging thick in the air. Historians still argue whether labour reform could have prevented the worst abuses, but your immediate concern is simple. How long could you actually last without collapsing into a heap? Inside, workers move in hypnotic rhythm, bodies bent, hands raw. Fringe accounts suggest some factories experimented with music, primarily drums or bells, to keep pace, which seems absurdly cheerful until you realise it merely disguised groans of exhaustion. You notice a boy no older than 12 stuffing coal into a furnace, his small frame working tirelessly, and you wince at the thought of your own weak arms in that environment. Every cough, every dropped tool, every shout seems amplified, bouncing off the walls, trapping you in a perpetual racket. Lunchtime brings no relief. You reach for a slice of bread while the floor trembles beneath a passing cart, and someone whispers a warning about a supervisor's sudden temper. Historians still debate whether workplace accidents were sheer negligence or calculated risks in the name of profit, but you're less interested in theory and more focused on not losing a finger. A fringe tidbit surfaces in your mind. Some workers allegedly use tiny charms tucked into pockets to ward off injuries, which in your case might be worth a try if only for the psychological boost. The day drags like treacle, muscles straining under repetitive motions that seem designed to break both body and spirit. You begin to notice the subtle signals: grimacing neighbours, hands wrapped in rags, the occasional whisper of protest, that hint at the hidden resilience required just to show up each morning. Sweat mingles with grime, and your lungs ache from dust inhaled during every shift. By the time your shift ends, your legs feel like lead, your hands are blistered, and you realise you'd probably last one day before your body stages a mutiny. You exit into the alley with a newfound appreciation for the rhythm of modern offices, cubicles and air conditioning, thinking ruefully that the Victorian grind wasn't just hard, it was relentless. As twilight settles, you wander into streets that feel simultaneously familiar and alien, alive with whispers, rustles, and shadowy movements. Pickpockets glide past with the elegance of trained dancers, and street gangs loom in corners, each one a reminder that danger is as omnipresent as the soot in the air. You feel the subtle tension of every glance, every footstep, and realise that vigilance here is not a choice but a survival requirement. Historians still argue whether these gangs were purely predatory, or offered a perverse sense of community, but right now, you're focused on not becoming a lesson for someone else. The lamplight flickers over grimy windows, casting long shadows where rumours and reality intertwine. You hear the faint whisper of a name that chills you, Jack the Ripper, and your pulse jumps at the realisation that fear was a nightly companion for many. Fringe accounts even suggest that some residents left cryptic warnings scrawled on walls or in chalk on door frames, which could either have been practical guidance or purely superstition, depending on who you asked. You hug the edges of the street, negotiating puddles, discarded boards, and the occasional drunken passerby, each obstacle a small test of awareness. Food vendors begin to pack up, leaving behind half-rotted scraps that kids eagerly scavenge. You notice a man balancing a tray of stolen goods while tiptoeing past a constable, and a strange mixture of admiration and horror settles in your chest. The air smells of smoke, urine, and something faintly sweet. Maybe someone cooking pancakes, or maybe just another chemical mystery of the slum. Historians still debate whether law enforcement's presence mitigated crime or simply formalised it, and you decide that for you the question is academic. Your focus is staying upright and relatively intact. You pause near a corner, listening to the cacophony of human life, laughter, arguments, and the occasional bark of a dog. Despite the danger, you see fleeting moments of ingenuity. Someone dangling a candle from a basket to light the way, children inventing games out of scraps, a neighbour offering a loaf to another. It hits you that the slum is not just a place of misery, it's a theatre of improvisation, resilience, and relentless adaptation. And yet, even with all this cleverness, you know in your bones that you wouldn't last a day. The danger, the filth, the noise, and the unpredictability would claim you almost instantly. You shake your head, half smiling, half dreading the thought, and start making your careful way back through the alleys you entered hours ago. The city fades gently as you retreat, the alleys softening in memory, the distant clatter of wheels, the muted chatter, the flicker of gas lamps. Everything slows as if the world itself is exhaling. You feel your muscles unclench, your breathing even out, and the sharp tang of fear dissipates into a calm rhythm. Imagine the streets now quiet, the children asleep, the factories silent, leaving only the hum of life beneath the surface. You let the tension drain, allowing a gentle curiosity to linger instead of panic, savouring the contrast between chaos and your own safe space. Close your eyes for a moment and picture the soft glow of a lamp, the quiet murmur of neighbours long gone to bed, and the faint aroma of distant bread baking. You're safe, warm, and removed from every hardship of those narrow alleys, but the vividness of the day clings softly, a reminder of human resilience. Feel the pulse of the city ebb, replaced by the soothing cadence of your own thoughts, drifting lazily between history and imagination. Let the tales of danger, ingenuity, and survival wrap around you like a cozy blanket, not to frighten, but to fascinate. Slowly, allow your mind to rest, carrying the echo of soot, laughter, and resilience into a calm, lingering dreamscape. So if you enjoyed wandering these soot-streaked alleys, dodging puddles and pickpockets with me, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more curious, chaotic, and delightfully absurd journeys through history, and I'll see you next time with another story so strange you'll barely believe it happened.